So I'm always emphasizing people to invest in your mental health and be mindful of just how much you let the external world infringe on the well-being of your inner world, which I feel like many people, especially in the West, don't seem to focus enough on. It's this continuous cycle of satisfying your various desires, your sexual, food. I'm going to order DoorDash and get food right away. Then I'm going to go do this and that and play video games, listen to this podcast, and do all these things that are distractions, and never actually addressing like who you are as a person and where you want to go in your life, what you want to do.
Hello, everybody. You're listening to Chatting with Candice. I'm your host, Candice Horback. We don't really have any housekeeping this week, so we're going to jump straight into the podcast. Please help me welcome contributor to the New York Post, Globe and Mail, Rav Aurora. So, Rav, thank you so much for joining. We had a bit of fun warming up, but I did want to say that I'm really excited for this episode because we have gone back and forth. And even today it was like, is he going to show up or is something going to happen with the babysitter and we're going to have to reschedule again? Because I've been following you for a while, and I think what your work itself is very fascinating, but what's more fascinating is the person behind that. And that's kind of what I want to get to with this episode, is kind of humanizing this really young, interesting person.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's great to finally be here. I know we've had so many countless delays for so many different reasons going on. And then this morning was just like so bizarre for me because I woke up and I was finishing this article on the upcoming Canadian election on Monday.
Yeah.
And I was trying to find a place to publish it. And there were a few publications that were kind of pushing back, not interested, which is a real problem in journalism, is like finding the right outlet and actually having a platform to voice your opinions, because so much of the mainstream media is just a monolith of opinions. It's like there's one side, then all the other opinions get pushed away. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of a bit of a struggle, but I did find a good publication that I've written before to publish the article on the certain dangers posed by the Trudeau government here in Canada. And so that was just published like 20, 30 minutes ago, right before we started talking and warming up a little bit. So yeah, it's good to be here. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, I wanted to get into that article that you just posted because I didn't have time to read it because we were literally DMing and you're like, I have to post this article. And it sounds fascinating to me. Like, you're right above, right? Like, we're so close geographically speaking, but for some reason, the information kind of seems to flow unevenly. Like, everyone is super involved in U.S. politics, and a lot of times we feel very disconnected to what's going on in Canada, where we'll just see clicky headlines, and that's kind of it. We very rarely read about it or really dive too deep. So can you kind of explain what's going on? Like, I've never heard of what a snap election is. I don't really understand the concept, and I just know that I see people from Canada that are Team Trudeau, and then he's got to get out. So do you want to enlighten this ignorant American?
Yeah. Usually it's the other way around. Usually it's Canadians who care about American politics, right? Mm-hmm. Not Americans caring about Canadian politics, because it tends to be very boring here. Whereas in the U.S., you got all the fireworks of freaking Donald Trump, and then Sleepy Joe, and the crazy orange man, and the guy who can't even utter 4 words and probably has dementia, and crazy Kamala Harris with her creepy laugh. Like, it's just like a reality TV series. It's not real. It's not real at all. Mm-hmm. The U.S. politics here, it's a bit more laid back. Mm-hmm. Although that seems to be not a accurate way to represent what's going on here, because you literally have a leader right now who is exercising authoritarian control, quite literally. Mm-hmm. You have there's just so much to get into, but he, especially with vaccine passports, I think is the major issue for this election. Mm-hmm. It's Trudeau who's been incentivizing provinces, which the equivalent of states, basically, incentivizing provinces to implement vaccine passports. So everybody 12 and over has to be vaccinated in order to go to a gym and work out, indoor dining, movie theaters, nightclubs, living on campus for university. And there are no exceptions for having had COVID and recovering and having the antibodies. no exception for even having a medical exception, by the way, which is like so bizarre to me.
So
I don't know why that would be allowed.
yeah, you see that happening here in some of the states as well, and that doesn't make sense because everyone keeps yelling science, and they think that if they can yell science loud enough and as many times as they can, that validates their argument. But science is always evolving. There's always at least two sides to it, right? It depends on what research you want to do. You're going to find experts that are constantly in disagreement. People are comparing it to other shots, and they're like, well, most people are fully vaccinated with MMR, measles, mumps, rubella, all of these things. And that's true. But I've never been asked to bring my card to eat to prove that I don't have measles. Right. It's just, you can't really compare it. It's not the same.
No. Yeah. And you can't even compare it with the research done on each of the vaccines. And I'm not even like anti-vax by any stretch of the imagination. I told my grandparents to get vaccinated because they're elderly, over 65, have underlying health conditions, they're overweight. So I told them to get it, which I'm happy they did. And, now they're fairly protected. Although I'm kind of slightly changing my mind in real time because there's some new data showing that the effectiveness of the vaccine tends to drop over time. And that used to be considered a conspiracy theory a few months ago, but there's literally an article in NPR that I just read, and also one in the Daily Beast, I believe, a couple of weeks ago, like stating this as absolute fact, that this is true, that the effectiveness does reduce over time. And that's very, very concerning, because then that would mean that the promise of the vaccine is not being met, and that there are other things going on. And then there's a whole conversation about boosters, which was in the news this week. The Pfizer company, who are meeting with the FDA trying to get approval for booster shots, even though the research they have on booster shots is just so scant, it's so limited, and then they're trying to draw these broad conclusions based on, from what I understand, a very small trial with not a diverse enough of trial participants. Because, when you're studying something, you want, men, women, you want older people, younger people, people with different health conditions, etc. But this was rushed very, very quickly. And it did not include anybody in the age range of 16 to 17. And that tends to be the age group which, excuse me, I don't know if you know, but myocarditis is a big issue right now with heart inflammation. I seem to be like the only one like tweeting about this, and some people think it's kind of crazy, but it's actually true. Like the data we have right now, like no conspiracy, no speculation, but like the actual data we're seeing in Canada and Israel and the US as well is showing young teenage boys experiencing disproportionate cases of myocarditis, which is just heart inflammation. And that's a big concern, and is not being factored in terms of policy decisions, and Pfizer is trying to rally behind the booster shots and their statement. Yeah.
Right, that's wrath of God money that they're making right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, people don't seem to understand how financial incentives work. Like you need to follow who's profiting off of this and who's not, and what the exact incentives are, because we're a very incentive driven species. Things that we want, we're more driven to get that, and we're more likely to filter out things that we don't want to see based on our biases. But the Pfizer, they in their statement that I was reading just yesterday, they were saying that for booster shots, we did not include any 16 to 17-year-olds in our analysis, in our study of the booster shots, but they said we are extrapolating, we're expanding based on the data we have for older people, and we're going to improve, we're going to try to improve booster shots for young people who already are not going to have a significant benefit from the vaccine, because we know healthy young people under 20, under 25 are at extremely, extremely low risk of COVID. But the media just likes to propagate just fear porn is the word I like to use. It's just like they're always trying to exaggerate fear and not actually understand the facts.
Oh yeah, because that's what gets people to pay attention, right? Is if you feel like it's directly gonna affect you or your family. And I can't remember where I was reading this, but they were saying that younger boys are 6 times more likely to get myocarditis from a vaccine than from COVID itself. And then, like you said, I've seen a lot of articles as well that are showing significant adverse effects for specifically young boys who are not generally at risk, right? There's a small percentage that have had a very bad experience with COVID, and that's really unfortunate. But just at scale, it doesn't seem to hit them as it does older people. And we actually know someone that lost their 14-year-old after their second dose. So,
Really? Was it a male?
Yeah, a 14-year-old son. So
was it heart related?
Yep.
It was heart. Wow.
Yeah. Perfectly healthy. Perfect. And it sucks because it's two parents that, based off of the information that they had, felt like they were doing what was best for their kid, and now they don't have their kid anymore. So it's not to say don't get vaccinated, but it's saying it's the only time we've never been allowed to have the conversation. Like, why can't we, like with the Nicki Minaj stuff that's happening right now, it's like, man, she just came out of left field, but it's amazing. And one of the Republican, I think she was running for Congress, she didn't win, Kimberly Klacik, she made a post and she's like, just a reminder. And she posted this Nicki Minaj photo album and she's in a thong and like bending down. And she's like, while you guys are celebrating her coming out and talking about free speech and censorship, remember that you guys are the ones that have an issue with her line of work as well. So censorship goes both ways. So you don't get to just celebrate her because she's saying something that you agree with at this moment. So maybe check yourself too. And I thought that was really cool because very rarely do you see anyone kind of criticizing their own party. And that's what I like to see. I like to see individual thought and critical thinking, and not someone who's just towing the line. So I DM'd her and I was just like, you go girl, that was really awesome.
Did she reply?
Yeah, we follow each other. See, that's another thing. So she's running for Congress. She's Republican. We follow each other. We've talked. I do want to reach out to her and see if she wants to come on. But it just again, it shows. I think it shows extreme maturity, and it's not judging someone based off of one piece of evidence and just coming to the conclusion that you know everything about them. It's like leaving that space open.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I know the Nicki Minaj thing is just so it's another one of those like, we're living through a simulation. This is not real. like Tucker Carlson, I think like 3 days in a row, he did a monologue on Nicki Minaj, and just like seeing like Tucker's like, swelled up face. And I actually like Tucker, by the way, which I don't know if I should say that, but I actually do like
Canceled.
what he does. Canceled. Yeah, I should just freaking leave right away now. Yeah, it's over. It's over. Maybe cut that part out. I don't know. But no, Tucker. Yeah, he's the only mainstream kind of media person that I actually respect. Really, like CNN, MSNBC, even other hosts on Fox News. Like they all just seem to be repeating these very stale talking points that lack any kind of nuance or any kind of analytical insight that is worth giving time to, right? Especially with podcasts right now, it's very, very difficult to find time to listen to everything. Mm-hmm. Like I have a crisis right now where I'm always seeing interesting podcasts. Usually like Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, Megyn Kelly, especially now. I love her podcast. It's really great. And it's like they're always putting out so much excellent content. And it's like I can only listen to like 20% of it. Mm-hmm. I just can't get everything in my head. I can't listen to everything. I try to, when I'm washing dishes or driving or, trying to work out, I try to, mix it in. Mm-hmm. But and so because of the boom of the podcast industry, we're seeing basically the demise of the mainstream media, with the exception of Tucker, whose numbers are still topping the charts, which is excellent. And with the Nicki Minaj thing, that was pure comedy. It was one of those moments where I was like, okay, time to sit back, take a laugh a little bit. And also like the deeper part of it, like you're pointing out, is just somebody who perhaps should be loyal to the Democratic Party or broadly speaking, more to the left wing kind of agenda, given her past or her, who she is as a person, right? Doesn't scream conservative, exactly, but all she's saying is like, yeah, like I need to, like all she said was that her friend's cousin had the
swollen balls that
adverse,
everyone thought was great.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the adverse event from the vaccine. She never said don't get vaccinated or the vaccine is dangerous. She just stated, an anecdote in her mind, and she shared that with the world. And you see just like MSNBC just going crazy, going after her, and then her retweeting Tucker Carlson's monologue on her, and then MSNBC just going crazy again, and just like they're just like going out of their minds about Nicki Minaj and all this kind of thing. But it's just the vaccine groupthink to me is just so dangerous right now, especially with young people. Like you're talking about, knowing somebody who had that adverse event and died, which is just so tragic.
Right. And it's it's like, you don't want to, you can say, okay, just because you know someone that has had an experience, right, and you're using that to justify anything, but you can go to VAERS, right, and the number's not 0. That's, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. We can talk about, everyone always wants to nitpick and say, well, those numbers aren't accurate and we don't know. Well, we can say that about any statistic ever given. So you kind of have to throw that argument out. But the number's not 0. So if the number's not 0, I think that warrants a conversation. And I think it comes down to the parents as well. I mean, I've never been anti-vax. My kid has all of his vaccinations. I've got all of mine, right? It's never been something I really thought about. And then I think this environment has had me kind of turning my head a little bit. And I've been seeing a lot of videos with Rob Schneider. Do you know who that is? He's he's in a lot of the Adam Sandler movies. He's the funny guy with the longer brown hair. He was in Big Daddy, 50 First Dates, a bunch of stuff, but he's a relatively famous comedic actor, and he has done a lot of podcasts and late night interviews talking about vaccinations. And I think his conversations are a little bit dated. I'm not sure because I don't see timestamps, but I think he's referring to just vaccinations, period, when it comes to kids having to go to public school, and saying that should be the individual's choice to assess. And I was like, whoa, I never thought about that. And I never thought I'm doing this because I have to. I guess I never, you know what I mean? You just assume that the government had done the research for you and all of these things, and then you just kind of make that decision blindly. So I was a little bit disappointed in myself that I guess, automatically did that. I don't know. Again, I'm not anti-vax, but it's just, I read all of the side effects for any medication I take or any vitamins, all of that, but you don't do it for anything else. So again, it's not saying not to do it, but it's just saying, maybe think about it, maybe talk about it. Maybe if you're being told you can't ask questions, then that should ring some kind of an alarm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So
go ahead. Yeah, I was just going to say it's so alarming to think that the government could be providing policies and incentives that are dangerous to our health. Specifically, young people is right now all I'm talking about here. I'm not saying older people shouldn't get vaccinated. Like I was saying earlier, the waning effectiveness of the vaccine, that is a newer concern that I'm learning about, and I'm not sure what to make of it yet. That is a concern. And you're seeing in Israel, which was one of the most heavily vaccinated countries from the start, who are experiencing a devastating wave of cases and hospitalizations right now, which has led to the push for the booster shots there. And so I'm looking at that and I'm like, okay, that is not where we want to go, but that looks like the place we are going to go because of decisions that have been made that are potentially not in our best interests, decisions that were made certainly with good intentions, but were rushed and were driven by other financial extraneous incentives that are problematic. But with young people, it's the myocarditis problem is a real concern. It appears to be something like 1 in 6,000 or 1 in 7,000 cases for roughly like 12 to 20-year-olds. So it's like 1 in 6,000 roughly for cases of myocarditis after the second dose. Mm-hmm. That appears to be It's more so the second dose rather than the first dose for experiencing myocarditis. And 1 in 6,000, like if that's a risk you want to take, you could take it. If your kid is obese and is diabetic, underlying health conditions, and he wants to go to school without worrying about COVID, that could be a risk assessment you could make, and you could do that. But if your kid is healthy, if you have a young boy who's healthy, it seems to not make any sense at all, given this myocarditis issue, to have the vaccine or at least use 2 doses. Because right now in the UK, Hong Kong, and Norway, they're only recommending 1 dose for kids, for young males in that age range. Whereas here in Canada, you're being coerced to get 2 doses if you're a young male. And in Los Angeles, for example, if you go to a public school, you're mandated to get the vaccine in order to go to class. Like that to me is just a total violation of individual rights, that you have to get the vaccine in order to get public education. Like that's just so tyrannical and authoritarian, like way beyond anything, you could say about like Trump and the dangers that he posed. Like this is real authoritarianism. This is real violation of our human dignity and our own individual integrity to make decisions that are in our best interests.
So in Canada, are you allowed, I guess, because I'm not familiar with your guys' rights, right? Your inherited rights. So I know here it was at, I want to say Rutgers University. They were mandating vaccines for all of the students, and only one of them was basically like, fuck you, lawyered up, sued the school, and now he's on campus. But I think the problem is no one's has a follow through, right? We just see a lot of outrage on both ends and no one's following through. So you have to be that put yourself in that uncomfortable situation if you want to be a part of the change. Do you know what I mean? It's having the conversations. It's not being silent when there's controversy. It's lawyering up. It's standing up for what you believe in. We have a mandate now, again, in North Carolina. We had the masks and then we got rid of the masks. We were maskless for a few months, and then they just put them back in randomly for no reason. We've had no increase in deaths at all, and they just slapped it back on. So a lot of the local businesses here are like, we're not following this. So you can come in if you want to masked. You don't have to. And I think that's where you start to see the changes with the small business and with the people that are actually on the ground. It's not with the politicians and all these people that are just blindly following all of these bullshit mandates, like mask while you're walking around the restaurant, but then you can take it off at the table. How the fuck is that science? It doesn't make sense.
No. It's not science. Masks have always been more of a social signal for you being on the side of science. It's been more of like a visual display of how seriously you take the risk of COVID, rather than this actually mitigating your risk of getting COVID. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like the masks, they come on, they come off. You look last year. I believe this was early last year, early 2020, when Fauci said masks are useless, that they're not effective. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't use them. And then fast forward later, just a few months after, it's everybody wear masks. Masks are important. If you're not wearing your mask, you're killing grandma. If you're out jogging on a track by yourself with nobody around you, you got to put on your mask. And just with schools too, like we know that young populations are not in any way strong vectors of contracting serious illness with COVID. We know that, where we know kids are at extremely low risk. But my young sister, she's in grade 4. She has to wear her mask all day in class, and she has certain nasal issues. Sometimes she has a hard time breathing. So I just told her to put it underneath her nose, because it's so stupid. It's not protecting her. It's not changing anything. I was listening to Megyn Kelly yesterday talk about her son, who is in elementary school, who was doing outdoor PE, like push-ups, sit-ups, and he was just sweating, and he had to put his mask on outside. That's not scientific to wear a mask outside where we know transmission is radically, like outside, you're safe. It's indoor spaces when you put people together
with stagnant air,
and in close contact where you have transmission. So this is all just like I think the most charitable way to interpret this is the health authorities, the government, they want to mitigate the risk of COVID as much as possible and kind of do an overcorrection with that. So like try to be as safe as possible to prevent COVID and even implement measures that may or may not work, probably do not work or don't work at all. But we want to, implement the tightest measures so we have the least amount of COVID deaths and serious cases and hospitalizations. But the problem with that calculus is that you're missing all the other consequences of that, all the unintended consequences, all the other factors that are related to that are economic, social, lifestyle, young people, all the ways in which,
kids.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That part
especially
of
the young kids.
Yeah. That stage of development is so critical for them. Like right now we have, he's just under 2 and he's in like a pre-K, and they teach them Spanish once a week. They have someone come in and teach them Spanish. The teacher's fully masked. They won't even let them wear those visors. And I was like, well, if you're going to have this mandate, especially with the little kids, can you just wear one of those visors, like the clear shields? That way they can see your lips. How the hell is my less than 2-year-old going to be able to understand what you're saying when it's a foreign language, when he can't read your lips? That's such an important part of learning language. They're like, no, sorry, we can't do it. We have rules from above, blah, blah, blah. It's like, this is madness. Or it'll be 100 degrees out and you see 3-year-olds running around with masks on outside. This doesn't make sense. I'll pull my kid out in 2 seconds if he's that age and we're still where we are, which is likely at this freaking point.
That is where we'll be. That is exactly where we are going.
Hope
COVID is endemic. It's not going to leave. It's here to stay. It's here to stay, whether we like it or not. We just got to learn to live with it. No, in a year, in 5 years, 10 years, this is where we are at. So we have to learn to live with COVID. It's, like your stepdad who just moved in. Maybe you don't like him. Maybe you hate him. You just got to learn to live with him. You can't get rid of it. You can't, you can mitigate risks. You can work around it. You can learn to live with it in a manner that isn't, dangerous to you or others. You can learn to cope with the certain effects of COVID. But yeah, it's here to stay. And the sooner we realize that, the more we're going to be liberal in the sense of like having more freedoms. That's the other thing with like changes with especially the Trump administration and with COVID. You're seeing like this inversion of the political spectrum where it's like liberals right now are people who want the tightest restrictions, who want a surveillance state with vaccine passports. That used to be more of a conservative right-wing kind of thing, whereas conservatives now are more about freedom, which used to be a liberal cause. They're about my body, my choice with the vaccine. That used to be a huge feminist cause. Now it's the people on the left are like, no, it's your body, but no, it's our choice. It's the government's choice to impose what you do with your body. Whereas conservatives are like, no, you should have individual liberties. So it's like everything is just completely inverted right now, and things are not making sense, especially when the authorities are consistently cracking down on any dissent from their own policies and their own miscalculated decisions.
Yeah, it's really, really ironic because it used to be the main talking point for abortion was my body, my choice for the left. And then the conservatives would say, well, it's not about your body. It's about you potentially, right? Because no one's still clear on what a fucking life is at this point. So it's potentially hurting another person, i.e. the baby. Right. So now we're at a place where it's my body, my choice with the conservatives. But then the liberals are like, well, no, it's not about your body. It's about you potentially hurting someone else. It's nonsense. It's like it's all like you said, it's all a simulation. I'm like, how does no one else see what is happening? This doesn't make any bit of sense. Totally backwards.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, things aren't making sense. So it's important to invest in yourself and your lifestyle. Things are crazy out there with the government and the authorities. You got to find a way to tune that out for a bit, because I know certain people who just go crazy looking at all these things in politics and all these policies that are implemented that are totally wrong and give all the perverse incentives. So for me, I'm always encouraging younger people of all ages, like, don't let it affect you too much. Like, yeah, I know the government is exercising semi-tyrannical control over you. Yeah, I know it's horrible, but like, still, find ways to exercise, eat healthy, meditate. Mental health is a huge problem we're seeing over the past couple of years with suicide, anxiety, depression, various forms of addiction, and social life being limited. People who are like single, who were unable to interact with other people and developed all kinds of horrible addictions and were just unable to cope with these things. So I'm always emphasizing people to invest in your mental health and be mindful of just how much you let the external world infringe on the well-being of your inner world, which I feel like many people, especially in the West, don't seem to focus enough on. It's this continuous cycle of satisfying your various desires, your sexual, food. I'm going to order DoorDash and get food right away. Then I'm going to go do this and that and play video games, listen to this podcast, and do all these things that are distractions, and never actually addressing like who you are as a person and where you want to go in your life, what you want to do. That's why I think it's with the podcast boom too. It's good that people like Jordan Peterson are encouraging people to change their lives, and people like Sam Harris are emphasizing mindfulness, meditation, and all these things, which are just so important for well-being.
So how do you stay sane? Because that's your job, is to be in the thick of this. You're always writing articles about the chaotic state of Canada or the US or politics. They're usually pretty heavy topics. It's stuff that fires me up, and it's just me reading one article. It's not me doing hours of research to write an article. So, and also we were talking, there's always like there's a fallout too, right? If you have all of these opinions that don't align with the mass majority of everyone else, especially at your age, I would imagine that that's also has to add another layer of stress to the situation.
Yeah. Believe it or not, I'm actually not always super stressed out about politics or culture. I have a very good way of decompressing and just tuning out all the insanity, all the hysteria in what's going on with politics and culture. I don't know, maybe that's just kind of in my nature. Like I've certainly experienced a lot of pushback for my views, and I recently had an article that you probably saw on cancel culture and things that I experienced at my university. And
you got kicked out of a class, right?
No, I didn't get kicked out of a class. It was a professor who on Twitter, I asked her if my views would be welcome in her class, and she's a very left-leaning professor who specializes in critical race theory, which is a topic I'm so tired of talking about and listening about. Like, I'm sure you've seen on Twitter, like critical race theory, CRT. It's like, stop it.
It doesn't stop. Doesn't stop.
Yeah, no, it doesn't stop. It's Chris Rufo works for City Journal, the guy who's always investigating different companies and schools who are implementing the critical race theory agenda. It's like every week he's uncovering a new company, whether it's like Disney or it's like some engineering firm or a law firm or this elementary school that are implementing these racially divisive ideas. So this professor, she was a specialist in critical race theory, and I just asked if I was welcome in her class, and she said, no, I'm not interested in your perspective. And then later there was appears to be some kind of a misinterpretation on my part, which was totally innocent, but what she really meant, which doesn't actually make her look any better, but what she really meant was, your views are not welcome in my think tank. She was making a youth think tank for young people to come together and discuss and debate and figure out ways to address racism in our society. And so I was asking about her class, but she was kind of talking about her think tank. And so anyways, that's what she was saying. Your views are not welcome in this think tank, in this group for young thinkers to discuss race issues. So that was just, it was kind of unbelievable. It's like, imagine if a conservative professor, like imagine if Jordan Peterson, was asked by some young left-wing student if her perspective was welcome in his class, her left wing, if she's a socialist or whatever. And if he said, no, your perspective is not welcome in my class or my after school youth program or whatever. And like, there'd be total outrage over this kind of ideological intolerance. But unfortunately, this is the norm. It's intolerance coming from the left that is so widespread in our universities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those things where you want to stop talking about it. And part of me thinks if you do stop talking about it, maybe it'll go away. I don't know. Maybe that's me being super naive and just addressing it at a ground level and just being hyper vigilant about your kid's school and controlling what you can. Right. It kind of goes back to make your bed. So make your bed, tackle it at the level that you have influence, because shouting into this void that is Twitter is not doing anything, unfortunately. It almost antagonizes the other side to just keep going. Have you ever done that exercise where you put your fist up to someone else's fist, but you don't really do anything and they automatically push back? It kind of shows the psychological reflex that we have, which is if you're giving someone something to oppose, they're going to oppose it. Whereas if you just let go, they stop. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, you definitely have a point there. And yeah, being overly like pugnacious and trying to pick every fight and trying to always change people's minds is a recipe for just going insane, because you can't convince everybody. You can't convince certain people, you just can't convince, and you just have to let that go.
Mm-hmm.
And that applies to that applies to everything, really, right? That's kind of a frame of mind that I've struggled with, especially, is like trying to change somebody else's mind about the perceptions of me and their opinions about me. Definitely in a political context, I've tried to do that, and then you just got to kind of give up at a certain point. But in other ways too, I've kind of struggled with that kind of thing, and you just have to learn to accept that certain people are just the totality of all their influences and all the things that have shaped their perspective in a certain way, where now this is what they believe about you or about this topic, and it is almost impossible to change their mind given how deeply entrenched they are in their own mindset and their own ideology.
Yeah, and how do you know that you're not in that same bucket? Do you know what I mean? I have to constantly check in with myself to make sure that I'm not going down a rabbit hole, or that I'm not keeping, blind faith to any arguments, and that I remain level-headed with a lot of things, because it's just, I feel like I'm a big feeler. It's very easy for me to get passionate about something, to get very riled up about something. So I'm definitely one of those people that should be meditating more, as you mentioned earlier in the podcast, but I just never find the time, or make the time. So I guess because you've been called a white supremacist, which I think is hilarious.
I've been called alt-right, which is, it's a euphemism for white supremacy, basically. It's kind of a nicer way of saying, basically.
Which is like, what do you mean? So someone did this to me recently, and I was like, well, I'm very little white, and I'm very much Asian and very much Jewish, so what are you talking about? And then they were like, well, you've internalized the white patriarchy and you assume your husband's white privilege. And I'm like, is that how it works? Like, what do you mean?
No, I've written so much about the whole racial wokeness pandemic. It really is a pandemic, especially after George Floyd, where you saw a kind of religious awakening in our institutions with regards to racial bias, racial justice, all these well-intentioned goals that we had, visions that we had about how to construct society, or how to deal with certain historically entrenched problems. But it's led to only really superficial and I don't know if mundane is the right word, but solutions to very complex problems, solutions that are very simplistic and often can be just totally counterproductive, and like kind of like a very little small band-aid you put onto this huge gaping wound that's gushing with blood, and you're trying to approach it with totally the wrong instrument, totally the wrong framework. And with race especially, it's one of the things that I've realized, especially over the past year, as I've written more and more about this, is the hollowness of race, or the total superficiality of race. Like these barriers that we have of Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, Indian, whatever, like these boundaries, like there really are no boundaries. There really is just truly, there's one human race, and, we originated from Africa, and we have all these different groups, and their race has been shaped by environmental influence and climate differences, and certain people are dark and lighter and have different physiological characteristics. And there's really no moral valence to any given race or ethnicity, but that's kind of become a perversely trendy idea that a certain race has certain characteristics. We see that in the woke narratives all the time about things like objectivity, rationality, work ethic, personal responsibility, being on time, which I'm often not good at, being things that are very white, that are representations of whiteness or white supremacy, and then you see, like, obviously the victim narratives about people of color, or specifically like Black Americans or Native Americans, people who have experienced oppression in the past. And it's just so it's so perverse, because you're making people into not just representatives of their race, which they have no control over, but you're making them into hostages of history as well. Like, mm-hmm. You're white, this is what your ancestors did. Mm-hmm. Even though there's often a total oversimplification of like white being this like unified category of oppressiveness, like in the past, whereas you had certain white groups like the Irish, Jews, people from Eastern Europe who were like oppressed and discriminated against in the U.S. There's all sorts of complexity there. It's never just white against Black. There's so much gray area with regards to racial prejudice in history. But right now, it's like as you're talking about with yourself, you're part Asian, you said, mm-hmm. white and Jewish. And it's like, and so that's an interesting kind of experience, right? Because you're like, is part of you Asian? Is part of you white and Jewish? Or right. Is it rather just
you exist in totality? Yeah. You're this.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. You're not a stratified person by race. You're just who you are. And that's dependent on so many other cultural and familial and social and genetic and biological and sociocultural factors that make you, right? You're not a representative of your race, and neither am I. But that's kind of the direction we're headed in, and that's something that I've had to kind of deal with in a very personal, difficult way, which I know we've privately talked a little bit.
Do you want to talk about
that before? I don't know. It's kind of a landmine. I don't know.
Is it a landmine? So I feel like it could be an interesting conversation.
Sure, yeah.
And I feel like every episode I say something that might get me canceled, so I guess preface it with that. But when it comes to anyone of a specific race, there's always that at least especially with the industry I come from, it can be a very racist industry, porn. I mean, it's clickbait.
Oh, really?
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's like
How so?
So specifically when it comes to what they call interracial porn, which is usually a very and it can't be someone who looks mixed. Like they have to have very dark skin with a white girl, and usually she's tiny and weighs 90 pounds and is blonde, but that's like the ideal recipe for them. But it'll be really derogatory. Like there's this one company, and I mean, everyone called me racist because I didn't do any interracial scenes for a very long time. And I would joke and say every scene I do is interracial because I'm Asian. So what are you talking about? Like you just have such a narrow definition of what that means. But all of the scenes, it's like these guys that they have talking like really like broken up English and wearing pants below their butt and wife beaters and smacking the girl around, and she might be saying the N-word, and it's really, really distasteful for a lack of better words. So I never got into that. This one guy started a company called Black, and I think he did it in such an elegant way that I was like, okay, I'll do that because I feel like that's a beautiful piece of work that I would be proud to do. I'm not going to do anything that I think is racist or derogatory. And that, unfortunately, is the mass quantity of that type of film. And I don't know why. Obviously, it's selling. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. But it's really unfortunate. So when stuff like that happens, some girls never do it, period. And they'll say it's because they're not attracted to Black men. And then they get called racist. I'm like, well, I've been told a lot. And I look mixed. Asian people can usually tell I'm Asian. White people think I'm Hawaiian or something. They don't really know. And some people just think I'm white, right? Like it depends on your perspective, I guess. But I have been told.
Yeah, I personally, by the way, I thought you might have been like Hispanic. You might have part Hispanic background.
I get that too.
You know?
Well,
Yeah.
Spanish.
Yeah.
There's some Spain Spanish in me, but not like Latin America or anything. So
right, yeah, which is interesting, right? It's like it just shows how, like I was saying, like how hollow racial identity is. Like some people think you're Hawaiian or Asian or white, Jewish, Hispanic. It's like ultimately those labels are totally meaningless to who you are as a person and what your values and morals and
it tells you nothing.
And what your curiosities are.
Yeah, it essentially tells you nothing about who I am as a person. But the point was, obviously, I'm not a purebred Japanese woman. There's a lot going on in here, so I don't look 100% Asian. But even with my mixed aesthetic, I have been told by people that they don't find me attractive because they don't like Asian women. Like my eyes are too slanted, or I've been told that people aren't attracted to me. Yeah, or that they don't like me because especially when I had my natural dark hair, it kind of accentuated a little bit. And like, oh, you look too Asian like that. I'm just not into it, or I don't like your freckles. I don't see a difference because I think when it comes to attraction, there's almost a lot of mystery that comes there. I can't tell you why I'm attracted to the things that I'm attracted to. I just am, right? And for some people, I can't deny maybe they aren't attracted to a specific race. And that I don't get it because I think there's a lot of variety within any race.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we talked about, is to just blanketly say I don't like Asian women or I'm not attracted to Black men. That's just a really vague statement. I'm like, maybe you just haven't met enough, because sexy people exist in every single ethnicity.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think it inherently makes you racist. I think it makes you maybe not so worldly or not necessarily very open-minded, but I'm not going to be anyone to tell you what to do with your body. You know what I mean? Like you get to have sex with whoever you want to have sex with, and I'm not going to voice my opinion on that, period.
Right. So you experiencing with just textbook racism, as you described about looking Asian, was that from like directors in the porn industry or people like other actors?
No, that would be like real life, like civilian life stuff. What happened with porn though?
Like recently or a while ago?
Man, when was my hair dark last? I would say the last time someone said it was probably 5 years ago or something. I go in phases with my hair, but yeah, I didn't take it offensively. I'm like, if you don't think I'm hot, that's fine. You know what I mean? I'm not
Right.
for everybody. I'm not trying to be for everybody. And you're entitled to do whatever or whoever you want to do. But I don't know. Do you think that makes someone racist, or do you think that just makes them a little ignorant?
Yeah, that's a very tough question to ask, and it is contingent on what you define as racism. Um, if you define racism as just impact or effect, which is more of a left-wing understanding of racism, like if some policy or some program has a racially disparate impact, then that would be racist, even if there are no racist intentions. Like if you policing is just naturally racist because there is a disproportionate number of black suspects who are arrested or shot by the police, which, not to get into all of that, but which is a primarily a product of differences in the commission of crime rather than the biases of police officers. So it's like, so different groups commit different rates of crime, and so they're arrested according to those rates of crime commission, which happens to be, it's not politically correct, but crime tends to be racially disproportionate. And anyways, that's a whole other discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But to your question, if having racial preferences is racist,
right? Because you've experienced something like this.
Yeah.
And how did you take it? Was it more on a personal level? This sucks that this person doesn't want to be with me because of your blood, essentially, and they're just stroking a really broad brush? Or were you like, man, she might be a little racist?
Yeah, it's something that I think about a lot, and I guess I don't have a clear answer, but I do have like a few thoughts. I think it's, this person that I was with, I was very, very close to on a deeper intellectual level. Like we just really connected, and she was and is a big fan of my work and what I do, and my podcasts and my articles and all these things. And she was just deeply fascinated by me and who I am as a person. But when it comes to attraction, she, and I would never reveal her identity, say her name or shame her in any way. That's just not who I am. That would just be pernicious and immoral and unethical to do, no matter how hurt I am. It's
a true gentleman.
Yeah. Revenge is a difficult, many people have impulses towards revenge, but revenge often is never morally justified. You want to deal with even the most deranged, criminals with a certain level of compassion and empathy, and deal with them accordingly. And Sam Harris talks about this a lot. I don't know if you're familiar with a lot of his work or if you've read any of his books.
I'm actually a big fan. We disagree on plenty of topics, but a lot of what he says, I think, is also super brilliant, which, I think I'd encourage more people to do that, is listen to people that you disagree with, because it gets you to understand topics on such a broad level.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sam, he's had a great, tremendous, transformative impact on my understanding of just human emotions and day-to-day experience. And he has a meditation app, which
I was going to ask if you use that, the Waking Up app.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We can talk about that after if you want, about meditation and mental health. That is a really, really important topic. But yeah, even with people who have done horrible, heinous things, this is something that Sam addresses in his book that I was just reading about the illusion of free will, which I'm not sure if I agree with him. I probably don't agree with him about his argument that free will is an illusion. Mm-hmm. And so in the book, he presents every decision we make is driven by unconscious forces that are beyond our control. And those unconscious forces are shaped by our genes, our environment, our upbringing, cultural influences that we also have no control over. Like, we didn't choose who our parents are, what our genes are, what kind of school we'd go to. Like, these things have all been chosen for us, and so we're just the totality of all these influences. And so we make decisions that we think are fully based on our psychological autonomy, when in reality they're shaped by our unconscious mind. And again, I don't think I agree with the whole concept that free will is an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
Although that might just be like a natural disinclination to believe that argument, because if you believe that, that can lead you to certain places that are very demoralizing or uncomfortable. Like, if you start to think like, oh, I don't have free will, that can kind of mess with your head a little bit. Although he argues it's been liberating for him to believe that. Like, he forgives people a lot easier. And on that end, I do agree with him in that, not to say free will is an illusion. That's still, I guess I'm still thinking about that, and maybe I'll change my mind about that. But at the very least, there's an understanding to be had that a person who makes a decision is not just fully exercising their total freedom in that moment to make that decision or to behave in a certain way, but that they are shaped by, like I was saying, all these prior influences that they have no control over. And so it's important to be compassionate about that. And we can go to the most extreme example of like an ISIS terrorist, a suicide bomber, a serial killer who committed all these things. You know, like an ISIS bomber was indoctrinated by the certain radical faith, and they were brought up with these ideas, and so they were forced into making this decision, and they had no other escape. If they escaped, they were a heretic and they were killed by this terrorist group. So they were, indoctrinated by this dangerous ideology, and so they end up bombing all these people, raping these women, and so really, is it that person's control whose dad was a terrorist and he became a terrorist as a result of cultural and religious upbringing? But to tie it back to my experience, it's I've been dealing with it very compassionately about this, with this one girl who I was very connected with and still am connected with, and she just deeply admires me as a person and is interested in my work and still wants to be my friend, and I kind of do as well, but her comments to me in the aftermath of me making like continuous romantic gestures to her, which I was kind of following the same trap of like, wanting, like, we were friends and then kind of wanting more, and her not being interested, her kind of friend zoning me. But we were just like, we had we vibed so well, and we had this deeper connection. And there's so many other like layers to this of like, just with, where I live, it's very hard in my experience to find like-minded people, especially like-minded young girls who are like interested in my work. Like, I sometimes tell my friends jokingly that I have like exponentially more support in like New York than in my own city. Like, I've like so many people who like message me on Twitter and like support my work, like people from like Joe Rogan messaging me, or Megyn Kelly or Ben Shapiro, or like all these people, which like feels great. But like in my day-to-day experience in person, it's very hard to find like-minded people here. And sometimes it's very isolating to not find those kind of people, especially in the context of romance and dating, not being able to find somebody who appreciates you as a person, or who understands kind of your intellectual curiosities. That was really the spark of this friendship that I had with this person, was the intellectual curiosity. Like, we were just very, very open and curious about very, very similar things, like spiritual, intellectual, cultural. And so, I was making these repeated gestures of like wanting more, wanting this to be an actual relationship. and she had turned me down several times, but I kind of kept on coming back for reasons that are regrettable, but also understandable. And so then she just kind of broke it to me about a month ago that she's not attracted to Indian or Asian men, which was the immediate response that I had was total silence. I just kind of left her on red for several weeks, which was totally
that's
understandable.
Awesome. Yeah, good move.
Yeah, which, well, I don't know if it's a good move now that I've changed course and I've decided to be friendly, which I don't know.
I think that's fine, but it's
yeah.
drawing some kind of line, you know what I mean? I think you can still be compassionate while recognizing that something is wrong. You know what I mean? And it goes back to your extremist example, which I feel we see this a lot. We see it a lot in movies, and we see it a lot. I feel like if you were to designate it to a party, it would be for left-leaning people, where it's to kind of blur the lines of good and bad. And it's to do exactly what you did. It's walking it back. So you walk back a terrorist from, their inception, and then all of these outside influences from people that are very influential, like a father figure, uncles, all of these things. So you have to ask, did this person really have a choice, or was this kind of written in the stars? And that's true. All of that's true. You can hold two thoughts at the same time. So you can recognize that certain things, unfortunately, certain people are doomed to a very dark fate. But it's also, you can have that compassion, you can hold that, and at the same time forgive them for what they do, no matter what that atrocity is, but still not abandoning the fact that this is an evil thing or this is a wrong thing. And I think right now, especially when it comes to film, and I see this in something like the kid movies that my son will watch, is they blur that line because they want you to empathize with that character, but then they don't follow through with the, well, this is still wrong. And that last bit is crucial. You can have compassion, you can empathize, you can forgive. I'm a huge proponent of all of those things. I believe in forgiveness for the most heinous things, because I think that helps alleviate any weight that you're going to carry from any wrongdoing that's inflicted on you. So even from a selfish standpoint, you need to forgive people.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But you have to follow through with, that was wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, yeah, of course. Yeah. Trying to find that balance is really important. And in my circumstance, that was very difficult, because my immediate psychological reaction to having heard that comment was kind of like a gun pointed towards me, but the bullet not actually hitting me, but actually hitting the wall behind me. Because that comment about, I'm not attracted to this race was not something that I identified with at all. I don't really identify as, Indian, whatever that means, right? I've even had certain Indian friends who tell me that I'm too white, because for whatever reason, I'm actually not that interested in Indian festivals or Indian movies, Bollywood, into the whole cultural thing, or going to temples and participating in these flamboyant religious or marriage ceremonies. It's just not something that I'm interested in. The movies and the music especially, I just find really...
I feel like I'm so into all of that. I love it.
Oh, really? You are?
Yeah. I think it's so beautiful. I'm like, I wish we did more of that. That's so cool.
No. No, I prefer Nicki Minaj rapping about having a menage a trois. It's that's actually been a big influence of mine, is hip hop culture and rap music. And that's something that that's actually what inspired me to write about very morally complex issues, was listening to, I don't know if you're a fan of Kendrick Lamar, Kanye West, Tyler, the Creator.
Love Kanye.
Those kind of rappers. Yeah, of course. So when she said that, it was this comment about not being attracted to this race was kind of a misnomer, because I don't really identify with this identity, but rather this identity has just been given to me by birth, rather than by choice. And so it's just not, so it was kind of like not being able to grapple with something that was very inappropriate and hurtful to say, because it didn't seem like I was directly attacked for anything that I have any control over. Right? Like if it was like, hey, you're too, you're very impulsive and you're selfish, like that's why I just can't be in a relationship with you, or you're not motivated enough, or you're too clingy and you're too emotional, or you're too you sleep around with other women, that's why I don't want to be with you. Like those are all things that you can control and change and apologize for, and redeem yourself on, but you can't apologize for being born with a certain skin color or try to change that in any way. That's just an immutable, inflexible part of your identity, which just makes the whole situation very tragic. I guess is like this thing that I'm not able to control is getting in the way of somebody who does deeply appreciate me for who I am, but can't be romantically attracted to me for this thing that is something that I've no control over at all.
So are you one of those people that can find yourself attracted to somebody simply based off of, we'll say, a spiritual connection or an intellectual connection? Like those things can override the physicality of a person? Or is that still a very important piece of that puzzle? Because I know people that can, right? They could be with anybody as long as there's a connection. I'm not one of those people. I need the whole pie. Do you know what I mean? And again, I can't tell you why I'm attracted to certain people. It just is. And while it sucks, and I guess I really hate her delivery on everything, um, it's like, well, she can't also change who she's attracted to. That's my belief. I know some people would disagree, and they would say that that's shallow and that doesn't matter. But whatever means that you use to achieve attraction is what it is, and you need to be attracted to, not even on a physical level. You just have to want to physically be with that person for romantic love to flourish.
Yeah. So you were asking about could I date somebody just based on my intellectual or cultural connection with them, and potentially putting physical attraction to the side or beauty to the side? That was your question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, the answer is no, for obvious reasons. It's very hard to isolate like one thing. In politics, it's relatively easier. Like people talk about being a single issue voter, where if you really care about immigration and what's happening with the crisis at the southern border, with all these caravans coming in and just the border being porous and there not being a definitive set of criteria of who we let in, who we don't let in, and you want to just base your vote on just that issue alone, that's understandable, and you can do that. You can vote Biden, Republican, or Democrat. But with dating and finding a partner, it's you can't just be a single issue voter. You can't be a single issue, a single characteristic person. You have to look at the person in totality of who they are, culturally, socially, and their personality and how they look. Obviously, I guess where I'm kind of unique is I think I would value more of a spiritual or intellectual connection than many other people would. Like a lot of my peers, my male peers, who perhaps wouldn't look for those things as much as I would. For them, it would be like, is she good looking? Is she cute? Is she pretty and beautiful?
Does she have an OnlyFans?
Does she have an OnlyFans? Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's absolutely going to be some kind of marker moving forward, at least in the States. It's like, if that's something that bothers you, you're going to have to get that out on date one, because people fall into one of two camps with that. And there's a lot of ladies in this pandemic that started an OnlyFans account.
Right, yeah, and I have an interesting story for you about that, relating to you and a friend and a weird connection, which is very, very weird to
Oh,
say the
do
least.
tell.
But well, let me finish what I'm saying first. So yeah, I think I look for an intellectual connection with somebody before being able to commit to them. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if it's just like a temporary, for fun, transient type of exciting thing,
Mm-hmm.
if it's just a little spark, it's fine. And I've kind of been down that road. But in terms of having a fulfilling relationship, to me, the inside really, really matters a lot about what the person, how. I think one of the traits would be like, how much does a person really care about improving their life and the lives of others? How much are they committed to self actualization and spiritual growth? And if the answer to that is like they don't care, all they want is to just go to school and be an academic superstar and do that, or be like person who's just trying to satisfy their hedonistic impulses and drinking and smoking, and there's
Mm-hmm.
that demographic too in my age group, um, which is very problematic, and I don't really connect with those kind of people, especially the people who are into just kind of partying and just working and sleeping, just kind of living a very animalistic, mundane, hedonistic lifestyle without any appreciation for human consciousness and what makes us unique and how to pursue deeper spiritual aspirations. I think that's a very important thing to me, is like, how much does this person want to grow spiritually, and how much they want to explore different realms of consciousness, of human behavior and ethical engagement with the world.
Mm-hmm. No, I couldn't agree
Yeah.
more. It's hard to take a relationship to the next level if you don't have all of those other things in alignment. Otherwise, I mean, unless you have someone who's at your level and you both want to just coast together. But I think if you're an ambitious person that values growth and values spirituality, that you have to be able to identify if this person is just for a season or if they are, marriage material. And I think, I mean, I've always been pretty good at that. I tend to live in the future. So when I was dating, I would be like, well, what do you think about kids? And how do you feel about marriage? And what state do you like? I would be just jumping ahead to all of these things that were important to me. And some guys would be like, she's crazy. I'm not doing this. I was like, well, if you don't want kids, I need to know that. You know what I mean? That's a deal breaker for me. But a lot of people don't want to have that conversation because they're like, well, he's so hot or she's so hot. I don't want to ruin it with all of this heavy stuff that's so far down the road. And again, if you guys don't agree, that's fine. If you just know that that person's for a season, but you have to invest in that person differently then.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, for sure. But yeah, I mean, the tricky thing then is what I just experienced, and that's so demoralizing. Is like when you have that connection that you're looking for, that you've been looking for your entire life, or at least ever. Like I've always been very intellectually curious, just super super curious about the world,
Hmm.
about politics, culture, and especially human psychology. That's definitely been a big interest of mine, and so finding this person was like, oh my god, like it was, part of it was just like a confidence boost too. It was like, oh my gosh, like I can, the way I'm talking to you now about my views and what I've experienced, like this person is actually interested in those things. It's like, wow, like that's amazing.
Hmm.
And especially amazing if you've never experienced that before, or if you kind of live in an area where, I don't know how generalizable this would be, but like in my school, there weren't a lot of people that were very intellectually curious the way I was. Again, not mistaking intelligence for intellectual curiosity. Like there were so many other females and males that were so much more intelligent than I was, and straight A students. I was fairly smart in like math and English and history and stuff like that, but I was never an academic superstar by any stretch. But I was always super, super curious and open to new experiences, and always interested in spiritual growth. And so finding this person last year, we first connected over being like huge Jordan Peterson fans, like
Hmm.
just like total fans of his work and his writing and his lectures, and we really connected on that. And then that became a gateway into understanding each other spiritually and intellectually, having discussions about spirituality and consciousness, and then developing that close bond, even if we didn't really like hang out for like several months or a few years. It was relatively brief, but we had, we vibed so well together. And then for this immutable difference to be the barrier for us to be together was so difficult to deal with. And like I was saying earlier, like the insult, if you want to call it an insult, or at the very least an insensitive comment, it didn't hit me directly. It was something where it was like, oh, like this is me. Like I'm actually Indian. Like what does that mean? What does it mean to be Indian or not Indian? And what does it mean to identify one way or the other? And so, for a little while it was like, oh, this isn't really an insult, because I'm not responsible for being Indian or having this kind of appearance. And but then afterwards it was like, afterwards I kind of had a bit of a spiritual reckoning, maybe you could call it, where I was meditating a lot afterwards, because I'm a person that ruminates a lot about things. Like I overthink.
Same.
Like up until I become insane. It's not a characteristic that's very common in other people that I found. Like some other people, it's not that they don't experience negative emotion, but they're much better at letting go of things very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Where something happens to me, it just like becomes like a parasite in my mind, and it controls everything else, and I'm unable to pay attention to other things without this thing infringing on my well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just like thinking over and over about this, and there was like one night where I woke up and like I just like couldn't sleep for a bit, and I was kind of wondering, like, is this what this person like said to me? Like, is this what I experienced? Like, is this true, or was this just like a weird nightmare or something? But it's like, no, this is true. But after that, I've been, meditating a lot, and well, we can get into meditation and stuff if you want, but yeah, I don't know if you want to jump in with anything.
No, I mean, it totally sucks, and I've been there to some extent. Is this like your first serious heartbreak?
Yeah,
I can tell.
Yeah, no, it definitely had like a lot of crushes before, and various temporary things here and there, transient little relationships, whatever you want to call it. But this was the first major one, because it was somebody that I connected with on a deeply spiritual and kind of intellectual level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess my advice would be that you should just look at it from like a state of more of abundance than scarcity. And I know it sucks, especially if you're like, well, I'm not in a place where I'm surrounded by a lot of people that are like-minded or curious or share my values, especially at this age. And I totally feel you. It's hard to find anyone, like we were saying, that has any kind of seriousness to their life, to their work ethic. A lot of people are just coasting, especially while you're in college. So it's just, I believe everything happens for a reason. And I think you're probably going to have a lot more heartbreaks. And, it's probably a lesson. And if it's your first one, it's going to leave a scar. The first one never really goes away, like that sting, I guess. But I'm sure there's a purpose for it. And it's cool that you said like you're still friendly with her. I feel like that'd be really hard for me. Someone was like, basically, I don't like I don't like your face, or I don't like your skin, but we can still be friends. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I know.
Sit on that one.
Yeah, on paper that sounds like traumatizing, but maybe I'm kind of proud of myself in a way that I haven't dealt with it in a bitter, obsessive way, at least explicitly to her. Like I never like shamed her, or I'm kind of like, she'll realize this, in the future if she hasn't already, and there's not much I can do to change her mind. It was kind of like just kind of like let nature do what it wants to do, and part of it was just like hopeless. Like there's nothing you can say to that comment afterwards, right? It's like you're a horrible person. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's that. Have you read The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, I think? One of the rules is don't take it personal. So it's basically 4 rules to kind of live by. And one of them is don't take it personal. And that's, for me, that's one of the hardest things that I struggle with on a daily basis, because especially with something like that, because you're like, well, how do I not take it personal? It directly has to do with me, and it doesn't. And it never does, right? And then also, if you're trying to use a metric for your success is someone else's acceptance or view or anything that's external, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure. So you have to ask, in any given situation, what can I control? Like what are the absolute things that I can control, and then measure your success and happiness based off of that. So if it's someone else's acceptance of you, or someone else's interpretation of you, or how they receive your message, whatever it is, that's out of your control. So you just need to scrap that immediately, right? It's not how many likes do I get. It's not did I convert someone to my way of thinking. It's not right? It has to all be internal. And then that's a lot easier, because if you're like, well, I did this podcast episode, I'm really proud of it, and I went on YouTube and it's 1,000 dislikes and all of these horrible comments, I feel like a failure. Well, that can't be your measure of success, because you're not in control of anybody else.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's always important to have a proactive mindset when dealing with difficult things in life, especially the kind of thing that I went through, and trying to find the positive in that circumstance, which, yeah, like you were saying, everything happens for a reason. It's a cliche. It's kind of a platitudinal statement, but it's true. Things happen a certain way, and they teach you certain things as much as they sting at the time. They reveal certain parts of yourself, or parts of human consciousness or human behavior that you may have not acknowledged before. For me, at the very least, on at least a superficial level, at least I recognize, like, oh, there are actually there are people out there who are interested in my work. I've come across one, maybe when my dream is to move to New York at some point, New York City. I actually have a lot of friends there that I've connected over with remotely, young, like females, males, older people that are like fans of my work. I think probably because I write for the New York Post mostly. And so I have a lot of people there who are probably, well, I know there are a lot of people there who are always reading my work and are, kind of fans or whatever. Whereas here it's a bit different, but at the very least, coming away from this experience, I have a little bit of hope of, in the future, I will find somebody who does appreciate me in the same way this girl did, but is willing to is willing to appreciate me for who I am on a much deeper level, or at least not let or at least, appreciate me for my appearance as well, and not just my interests and that kind of thing.
Yeah, super important. When you're young, you want to be with someone that wants to, jump your bones. Otherwise, it's not gonna be good for anybody. Then you just have a roommate or a friend. You know what I mean? So you have to have that spark. So I say her loss. I mean, I totally agree. Yeah. You don't find young, ambitious people, and if you have a connection with them, I think that you fucking take that opportunity, sister. But it's, it's not meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah. A couple of my friends said that, like, and I don't agree with this, but like, they're like, Rav, like, you're on this path and you're super successful and ambitious, and you're probably, like, in 5 years, you're probably going to be like 10 times more successful, and obviously, like, rich and, doing well, hopefully move to a big city and all that. And
then all of a sudden she's going to be like, hey, Rav, you know what? I really have this thing for Indian men.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I try not to think of it that way. Well, the reality is you've had Gad Sad on your podcast, evolutionary psychologist, and he writes so much about this, about what drives humans to become attracted to other humans, like what are the biological dispositions we have, and it just happens to be a biological reality that men who are successful and ambitious and show promise, intellectual promise, financial promise, who are driven to do important things in the world, that is a very, very attractive thing for women of all ages, right? That is something that women look for, and so I guess I'm not super worried about the future, and I think that would obviously help, being somebody who's very ambitious and finding other ambitious women out there. But I think for now this was a good learning experience, I guess. And yeah, I mean, it is still very difficult because it drives me a little crazy, but it's kind of like I'm kind of learning to detach from it a little bit, because she still really wants to be friends, and I kind of do a little bit, although she really, really wants to be friends, and she's like reached out, like, again, like, let's go out for coffee, let's hang out, you're so interesting. And she's encouraging me to take this personality test, that she's very interested in my personality, and I'm interested in hers too. So we're still kind of like going in circles a little bit. So that's very tough to get over, that kind of thing, knowing that you just can't really be friends if there is that difference in intention.
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah, it's really tough you can't really put that genie back in the bottle, as they say. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I guess, is she one of those people that, was there ever a gray area? I say this because I know a lot of young men that find themselves in a very similar situation, and they try to take the relationship to the next level, and then the girls will never mind, but then sends all of these mixed messages, like having you do boyfriend duties, but without having that relationship. And that's so unfair. And I think it's so important to set those boundaries, because that's fucked up.
Yeah, no, I'm not blameless there on that part. There are certain missteps, misinterpretations that I definitely made, or not even misinterpretations, but like she had laid boundaries very clearly, like when we were we stopped talking for a bit, then we were talking again. She reached out in like May of this year, April, and then she said, like, I only want to be friends. And this was after like several times of like friend zoning, not friend zoning, this very gray area that we were in. So she laid down these boundaries, and then I was like, okay, I can't really pursue this because I have different intentions in mind. So she was right in laying down those boundaries, but then the problem became more so it was definitely her fault, and afterwards, and also mine, because she was asking to hang out consistently, and I was kind of like, yeah, sure, we can hang out, we can go for coffee. And then she kept on asking like every couple of weeks, because she was, she also can't really find other like-minded, intellectually curious guys. Like even, and this is very kind of hurtful too, is like when, we've talked a bit, and she's told me how like other guys she dates, they're boring compared to me, but they're hot, so she can be with them. That's kind of what she looks for. But like, she's like, no, Rav, you're interesting. Take this personality test. You're cool. I'm interested in you as a person. But yeah, for dating, I want the hot, muscular white guy with a big car. Whatever it is that she prioritizes in that way. But yeah, that was so she kept on asking to hang out, and then I made the fundamental misinterpretation, or at least I was kind of pursuing the fantasy in my mind of like, okay, I think I can convince her to like me. I think I can convince her to be romantically interested, because she was so desperately asking to hang out and be friends. and spend time with each other. But I just I kept on delaying it for a while, and then I mistook her just constant advances to hang out as like, oh, maybe she likes me more. And then I kind of made some very explicit gestures, which again, that is her fault again, because I was making it very, very clear that I'm interested in her, and she can't be naive to think those certain signals I was sending were totally platonic. But I think she was like, I still like, I really want to be friends with this guy, and I'm willing to,
What were the
let it be kind
signals?
of. Oh gosh, is this a personal therapy session, or is this going to be like watched by people on YouTube? Both. That's funny. It was, just a number of signals of like, I don't know if I want to be too specific because this is public,
fine.
I guess.
Yeah.
But there were very, very clear signals and certain gestures I was making that were hinting towards that for sure. But I think in her mind, she just so desperately was interested in me as a person and as somebody to like, I don't know if I want to use the word teach, but like kind of share, my perspective and my knowledge and my diverse interests and my research and all my deep spiritual experiences and interests. Like she was so interested in that she was willing to overlook a very explicit message on my part that I wanted more. And then of course I, made the mistake of overlooking her very explicit message that she wants to be friends. And so it just kind of exploded. And then she said this thing. And so now we're still kind of in this area where, I'm kind of like saying, I'm interested in kind of hanging out, and she definitely wants to hang out, but I know, like I've even told her like, we should maybe hang out, and she really, really wants to hang out, but I know that would just be so demoralizing for me to like hang out with her and like temporarily enjoy her company and have deep discussions, but then for the whole time for me to think in my head like, oh, this is just platonic, I can't get more because of my skin color. Like having that idea in my head would destroy the whole dynamic we had, especially the dynamic of like trying to impress her a little bit, which is kind of our initial spark, is like through deep discussions, like impressing her with my, intellectual insights or my spiritual insights. And so now it just kind of felt like, what am I doing this for? What's the point if she views me in this very distorted, racialized way, which is just so hurtful.
Yeah, I would kind of nip that relationship in the bud if I were you. I think I think men and women having friendships is already really complicated. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's definitely, at least in my experience, more often than not, somebody gets feelings. And then if those are not reciprocated, then you can't really go back. It's never that pure friendship that it was before. And I find like the healthiest ones are, like, for example, all of my guy friends are my husband's best friends, right, that he grew up with. So they're not really my friends per se, right? Like we are friends, but there's that buffer. Do you know what I mean? And especially when you're younger, it's really hard. You have all those hormones going, and it's just difficult. Again, not impossible, but if one person, like you said, if you have different intentions going in, it's really hard to maintain that pure friendship relationship moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. We should probably hit on mindfulness, mental health stuff. I know you kind of wanted to touch on that if you want to go there a little bit.
So before we get into that, I didn't want to forget to remind you. I want to hear this OnlyFans bit. Yeah. And by the way, I know when we first were talking to you, you were nervous to come on because of who I was. Yeah. It's totally understandable. You know what I mean? But it goes back to not broadly brushing anybody. You know what I mean?
Which is why I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When I first looked into you a little bit, I was like, oh, is this person who I think they are? And I still would have certain moral reservations maybe about that whole industry potentially, which I think are kind of justified. And that's a whole other discussion. Maybe we shouldn't open up here because I know we're limited on time. But that would be an interesting discussion to have. But for me, it comes down to the individual level, right? It's not about, like we're talking about race earlier, about like, I'm not attracted to this race, or I don't like this type of person. So for me, it was like, initially it was like, oh, like, I'm not sure about you and about like your work and stuff. Especially because like I grew up in a kind of a strict, spiritual environment, or, well, it's complicated, but I was kind of brought up in a religious environment, but then
Mm-hmm.
my parents kind of became less religious, and so it was just kind of believe whatever you want to believe type thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think I spoke to Michaela Peterson, who's a good friend of mine. Has she been on your show, or have you been on her show?
No, I feel like there was some kind. Initially, we were both supposed to do each other's show, and then it got rescheduled a bunch of times. And I feel like someone got in her ear and told her that I was not a good look for her brand or something, and that is what
Really?
it is. But yeah, if someone, whether it was
Really?
her coming to this realization or daddy or something, but someone shut it down.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah, that doesn't seem like her, because she's very open minded. She's
I
not
thought
strict
so.
or ideological. Like, she's very open to like talking to whoever.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I don't know. Maybe there's some kind of miscommunication.
Something
Maybe
happened.
maybe I should reach out to her. Maybe you'll mention that.
Yeah, if you want, it's curious.
Yeah, yeah,
I messaged her. I
yeah,
was like, "Is this what's going on?" Because you can just tell me. Like, I'm not thin-skinned.
yeah,
It's fine. I just like honesty and transparency. That's really important.
yeah. Right.
And I wasn't getting that, so we'll see.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I reached out to her, and I don't know why I reached out to her about this. But yeah, I did. And then she told me that, yeah, like, she's a cool person and she's into like intellectual dark web stuff, and you should definitely talk to her, Rav, something like that. She said to me over Instagram, and I was like, oh, okay, like, that's fine. And then I saw Gad Sat on your podcast, and was it Colin Wright on your
Mm-hmm.
podcast?
Colin's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. He's awesome. He recently got his Joe Rogan appearance, which is huge. Which I
Mm-hmm.
was talking to him about that. He was not supposed to be on the podcast. I think it was the founding editor of Quillette magazine, where he edits that, Claire Lehman. She was supposed to be on, but she's in Australia, and so she couldn't come on. And so he was in the States. He's their U.S. editor, and so he got the opportunity to go on Rogan like last minute, and that was super, super, super cool that he got the opportunity.
Oh,
To do
totally.
that.
He's doing really important work. So
Yeah,
anytime I see someone like that
yeah,
that's getting
yeah,
exposed to that kind of volume, it's
yeah,
amazing. Mm-hmm.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, so then, yeah, I talked to Michaela, and then I was like, yeah, like, whatever, like, I'm interested in this person. Then I kind of looked into you more and watched your podcast, and then that was fine. Regarding the anecdote with the friend, I mentioned to a friend that I was going to do your show, and he had watched some of your stuff before,
Mm-hmm.
and to put it euphemistically, he was very involved and obsessed with you a little bit, and had how do I say this in a more intellectual manner? He had been engaged in self gratification using you. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
That's my best way of saying it.
Okay, yeah, that's funny. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was kind of weird. And then it was like, he's like, oh, you're going to her podcast? And I was like, yeah. And then he's like, oh, that's cool. And he's like, oh, she's super hot and cute. And like, her husband's so lucky to have her. And like, oh, what would it be like to like be with her?
That's so funny.
And I was like, I do not want to hear this before I talk to her. That's kind of weird, but
yeah, Gad made a joke,
funny.
and he was like, I had to do my research. And I was like, oh my God.
That's funny.
Yeah, I mean, I very intentionally keep my Twitter as like PG,
Christine?
yeah,
PG?
as possible,
Yeah.
because I have people that I put on pedestals that follow me. I'm like, I don't need a neuroscientist to see my butt. You know what I mean? So let's be respectable here. People can find the other channel.
He might be single and he might like your butt. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true too. Maybe I'm not capitalizing on an opportunity here.
Yeah. You're just using capitalism to your benefit by doing these things, and
Exactly.
do what you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I still have my moral reservations about that kind of thing. I am more open-minded than a lot of religious people, but I kind of I guess I could see just on a purely secular level too. I think, was it Melissa Chen that you had this little Twitter back and forth with about this topic recently? I think I saw that, where I was kind of agreeing with her a little bit recently.
Oh,
About the
yeah.
poor.
Yeah. And the thing
She's a good
she's
friend.
really
Yeah,
good
yeah.
friend. She's really good friends with a bunch of people in the industry. So like it doesn't
Oh, really?
make
Okay.
it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't make
Okay.
sense. And the problem with a morality argument is morality is subjective. There's that kind of funny little joke that cannibalism or eating people is only wrong if you're not a cannibal, right? So
Right.
everything is
Yeah.
subjective. So you can't, and that's what I love about Shapiro is he doesn't use his religious argument for anyone if he's not with like-minded people, because the foundation isn't agreed upon. And he's so intelligent that doesn't throw him off. He can keep going, right? So it's to say, and he kind of has a very libertarian stance on it, which is what he personally disagrees with it based off of his morals, and that's fine. But he doesn't think it's necessarily something that the government should be regulating or censoring. And I totally respect that. I think individuality and the way that we're brought up and our spiritual experiences and the way that we interpret things even outside of this world, this life, is going to impact how you look at something. And to me, my take is sex can be whatever you want it to be. I do think that sex with the right person can be this transcendent experience and can be super spiritual and sensual and be love. It can be this big, beautiful thing. But I also think that it can be something that's like really hot, really fun, and that's all it is. It's just, leave it
Yeah.
where it's
Yeah.
at. And I think both things are fine. I think it's so important to recognize the difference between them. So I think a lot of people that have the moral issue with it, it's like, well, that's on you, right? That's maybe not for your
Hmm.
house and not your relationships, and I respect that. But
Right.
to say something is objectively wrong, or it's the reason that society is on its downfall, which is kind of what Chen was leading to, is the degradation of
Yeah.
society, and people is like, that's a reach. That's a fucking huge reach, because if you want to just look at statistics, I mean, since the height of internet porn, like rape and abuse against women has gone down almost 80%. And like, this is something you can look up. And obviously, if you know statistics, you can't say cause and effect, but you can absolutely say that there's a correlation happening when you look at this data.
Right.
So
Right.
it's how
Unless
you
there's
want to
some other
interpret it.
major. Yeah. Yeah. Unless there's some other major factor which I can't think of, but I'm sure you've done the research.
Well, in a lot
Like,
of
I
the
don't know.
countries that legalize
Right.
it too, it goes
Right.
down. So it
Okay.
does hold
Interesting.
water. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. No. I fully support and have no issues with like sexual exploration. Like I have certain Christian friends who are very committed to like finding one person, having sex with them, and being with them for the rest of their life. Whereas I'm far more open to exploring, even if it's like temporary, if it's like a 1 week thing, or
Mm-hmm.
you go out. Like I have a friend who travels a lot and goes to different countries and has these romantic excursions, you could say, little
Mm-hmm.
experiences with
Mm-hmm.
people, and it's temporary, it's fun. Like that's kind of exciting, right? Is to not to I guess some people have a very sacred view about sex, but it's similar to like you don't just want kind of one variety of one thing. You want different experiences to know what you
What you
like
like.
ultimately, and not to be stuck with this one person since you were 25 and then think,
Because you gave something away you can never get back.
yeah,
You know what I mean? That's dangerous. That's super dangerous.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, but at the same time though, like I know people who married young, Christian oriented people, and they're very, very happy with them. And if that's what their moral compass wants them to do, then I totally respect that. And I think there's a certain value in that. I think with any kind of objection that I would have about the porn industry would be about kind of gratifying yourself by watching and potentially robbing yourself of actually getting out and having those real experiences. Like I know certain friends who, they're self-gratifying and they're doing these things and they're just watching and watching, and that's how they experience this pleasure. And that can be a good thing in the sense that if they're just always depressed and frustrated and they don't have that outlet, then that kind of relieves them of that impulsive, sexual desire, especially when you're a young man or a young girl too. But then at the same time, I see certain friends, and I'm very fortunate or happy or maybe proud of myself that I haven't developed a lot of those addictive habits. But I definitely know certain friends, and I do want to hear your thoughts about this, where they're just feeding this addiction cycle where they're just watching and gratifying themselves without actually pursuing meaningful relationships outside of that, because they just kind of feel relieved when they are by themselves and do this, and then they don't feel the need to go out and pursue fulfilling relationships, or at least they're less kind of inclined to, because they've been given this very easy way of just accessing the internet and just clicking a couple of buttons, and there you go, that's their pleasure, rather than going out and going on dating apps or meeting new people and socializing and getting to know people and learning about them and actually having real human conversations.
I think when it comes to anything, I mean anything, if you indulge in that particular thing in excess, that's a problem, right? You can drink too much water and kill yourself and dehydrate yourself. That's a real thing. You can I can eat a cheeseburger and go have ice cream, and that's not going to wreck my life. But for some people that might, right? If they have a problem with eating and with indulgence, and if they're severely overweight or obese, that's going to really throw them off track. So it all depends on the individual and personal responsibility when it comes to modulating how much of anything that you take, whether it's you're glued to your cell phone for 12 hours a day and you're shutting off the entire outside world because all you want to do is sit on Twitter and Instagram. I don't think that that's any different than scrolling through a porn site, because both things, you're focused on something that's synthetic and avoiding the outside world, which is real, and you're missing out on that real human connection. I think when it comes to quote unquote porn addiction, because I haven't read anything compelling that even suggests that it exists, right? And I talked to Dr. Deborah So about it, who's a sex researcher. She says it's not real. Essentially, when you look at the neurotransmitters when it comes to these addictions that are we'll say new addictions, whether it's social media, cell phone, porn, gambling, all of these things, it almost looks like a habit. So it's essentially a habit, right? It's a maladaptive habit. So if you were to learn basketball and you were to practice every single day at the same time for the same amount of time, and that became habitual, like that pathway would replicate someone who had a porn addiction. So it's just a really bad habit, essentially. The thing that separates an addiction is needing more of like the dosage, right? Like you start to, I'm losing my my words, like your tolerance keeps going up, right?
Okay.
And that's a sign of an addiction that doesn't happen with porn. And some people have tried to I would say maliciously misinterpret certain data or just make up data that says that, if you keep watching, it escalates. That's not true. And it's been debunked a bunch of times. So it's not an addiction, or at least as I've been told, it's not an addiction. It's not to say people don't suffer from it, but I would have to say you would have to look at the individual level. Like, does this person have antisocial tendencies? Are they maybe a little bit socially awkward anyways? And this is just the tool that they're using. And let's say the internet wasn't invented yet. They might have found something else that would have taken them out of having to interact with society anyways. Right. So it's kind of a chicken and egg situation.
Sure.
And then for some people, especially young men, when you do have, like all of those hormones and you're getting random boners and you don't know why, and you don't want that to happen on a date, and you're super nervous, I think that self-gratifying before could be
those suck, by the way. Sorry.
I've heard those suck. I didn't even know it was a thing until my husband told me about his younger years, and no one warned him about it or told him what to do with it. So I think if you look at it pragmatically, it's like, okay, I can relieve myself in a healthy way, right? Consuming content, not involving anyone else. I'm not cheating on anybody. That way I'm calm. I can get my shit together, and then I can go on this date and actually engage and actually be into it instead of worrying about my hormones and what's going on. You know what I mean? I think there's a lot of benefit to it. So it all comes down to personal accountability, where your biology falls, and obviously if you're morally okay with it, which not everyone is.
Right. Yeah, no, your points are very well taken. Yeah, I like what you're saying. I've kind of immersed in this. I agree with you because I see the parallels with a while ago, like when I started first writing about hip hop music. That was actually my entry point into journalism. I used to be a music journalist writing about rap lyrics and like hip hop music scene, which I'm still very much into. And then there was always this like conservative kind of backlash towards hip hop, some of which is totally justified, by the way. Especially like exposing young girls to, like letting your 12-year-old listen to music videos where Nicki Minaj is like showing off her tits and like twerking and like all these things. Like obviously those are wrong, but the key buffer between those cultural kind of hedonistic influences would be family, would be your upbringing, and same with porn, right? Like you're saying, there are other predetermining factors that could lead to certain maladaptive habits with porn, and those things need to be addressed. Not really the porn itself, but rather antisocial behavior or certain social pathologies, etc. Those things are definitely important to look at. Yeah. Do you want to get into the mindfulness thing as well before we go?
Yeah. We have a little bit of time. And I feel like it's all connected, right? Because when you start practicing mindfulness, I feel like that's when you start the version of reality that you exist in starts to shift, and then you start to look at problems different, and you start to look at people differently, and you start to question when things like morals, things like all of these objective truths that have kind of just been put on you from a young age. So it's the way that you can really understand yourself and then therefore understand the world around you. And so many of us don't take the time to just sit in silence with our thoughts, right? Like Naval talks about clearing out your email, like email zero. I think inbox zero is what he calls it. So sitting with your thoughts and not fighting them, not having that, I think, that stereotype of you having to sit down and not have thoughts intrude that silence. And if you do have thoughts, or if you are interrupted, that you're not meditating properly, and that's not what it is. It's seeing it like a passing car, right? So you're aware of it, but you don't hold on to it. So you get to the point where if you do it enough, Naval says you get to inbox zero, and then that is where you can experience true silence and just be. And then there's a lot of people that can't just be. And then that's the problem. It's like you are glued to these devices and these distractions, and then you get filled with angst and whatever other negative emotions that come up because you're so insecure in that moment. So it's so crucial. I mean, I don't do it enough, but I've learned a lot about myself and my relationships through the years of me practicing on and off. And I think we were talking about Sam Harris's app, the Waking Up one. And the coolest thing, I highly recommend it. It's, I think it's like $100. And if you can't afford it, you email him and they'll give it to you for free, which is pretty freaking cool. No questions asked.
That's awesome.
But when I do it, I don't know if you have the same experience, but I'll think something and then he says it. And there's all of these moments where exactly what's happening, if maybe I get an itch on my face and he's like, maybe you're getting an itch on your face. I was like, how does he know? How does he know? But it is the most incredible meditation app that I've used.
Yeah, no, I have had that experience, especially the one thing he says a lot about. He has different ways of saying the exact same thing about like, oh, if you're lost in thought right now, where did that thought come from? Where does it come from? What is its origin? How is that thought impinging on consciousness right now? And where does that thought go? And then all of a sudden just kind of just attacks, kind of just pinpoints that one problem that you may be having in that time, which is just being flooded with thoughts. And I think that's the fundamental insight of mindfulness, is that there is that you don't have to be continually spellbound with this incessant and this incessant and never-ending conversation you're having with yourself in your head all the time. This constant identity construction and construction of others, and it constantly just interpreting the world and being lost in the past and the future, and just not acknowledging the present moment that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's especially important for me because I'm actually, I would say, like, psychologically or biologically not predisposed to mindfulness practice, because I'm an overthinker and I'm very high in creativity, and I'm always just like thinking about the next article idea, or like this idea for going on this date with this girl, or like this thing that I want to do, or maybe I want to write this book, or sometimes getting stuck in fantasy land. Like, that's very, very easy for me. Like, oh, like one day I want to go on Joe Rogan's podcast and I want to say this and that, and oh, how can I reach out to him? Oh, the one time he said this to me, or oh, I'm talking to Ben Shapiro tomorrow and this is what I want to say, but oh, what if I mess up? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I sound like an idiot and Ben Shapiro starts judging me and what I'm saying? Or what if I say a stat wrong? This like constant like conversation you're having with yourself is not useful at all. Mm-hmm. That's the fundamental insight, is like this perpetual flood of thoughts that you're having is not actually helping you. It's actually just ruining your state of mind. And for me, this is something that I'm still kind of learning to balance a little bit, because I'm still kind of, I'd love to talk to Sam Harris about this one day. And I do have other meditation instructors. Like, I don't know if you've done in-person courses or retreats at all. Have you ever done that before?
Yeah, I've done some in-person retreats. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are really helpful. But I would like to talk to other experts in the field about like balancing between actual creative rumination, like actually coming up with ideas. Because frequently when I'm lost in thought, which is, the very thing you're attempting to eradicate in meditation, or at least mitigate to some degree, that thought process often leads to the germination of various creative ideas. Like, I'm just like lost in thought while I'm working out or while I'm driving. All of a sudden I'll have like, oh, that's the perfect way to end off this essay, and I've been stuck here for the longest time. Like, oh, I can wrap it up with this anecdote about this event. Oh, that's perfect. And then I tell my editor that it's perfect. Or like a few times I've even like, before going to bed, I'm like ruminating about a specific idea, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, like that's a really compelling article idea. I'm going to pitch it to my editor tomorrow, and then she's interested. But then the counter side of that is like, again, where the rumination just leads to the collapse of well-being, where you're like, this girl said this to me and I can't just get it out of my head, and I'm just thinking about it constantly and incessantly, of like, oh, she said this to me, and oh, what does this mean? Is this over? Are we friends? Are we not friends? And this cycle of thoughts. And so mindfulness just really grounds you in the moment and liberates you of all the baggage of past events and future plans. Like, in this moment, like, I am talking to you, and that is a beautiful thing, right? Mm-hmm. That's also the beautiful thing of conversation. Like, when you're talking to somebody that you really like and it's a fruitful conversation, it's like, for that period of time, you're not constantly thinking about the future or the past. And then sometimes, like, after that conversation, you realize like, oh, this is what human experience is like in its truest, most pure form, is connecting with present experience with full force and with full vigor, rather than being perpetually lost in thought and not realizing that this moment is subjectively all you have right now, is while you're at the gym working out, or or you just woke up and you're making coffee, or you're eating, or you're going out for a walk, right? It's being and enjoying that moment, rather than letting your own psychological processes just like totally destroy that experience, right? It's like, you can look at a beautiful tree with totally different mindsets, right? You can look at it as like, oh, this is beautiful, this is really pretty, and this is like the greenery, and this is how the branches are formated, and what a beautiful piece of art created by nature, right? That's one way of looking at it. Or you could be staring at it while you're out for a walk, and you can be thinking like, oh, she said this to me, and oh, am I a shitty person? Like, fuck her. Like, oh, I hate this. And you're not seeing the tree. You're just seeing this this horrible thought process in your head. So I think meditation is really important for dealing with that endless cycle of being lost in thought.
Mm-hmm. No, I can definitely relate. I've done some of these, I guess, like brain training weeks, and essentially it's basically super deep and intense meditation, and for very, very long periods of at a time in chunks, and you're
Really?
basically in sensory deprivation, so everything kind of gets amplified. What sounds to me what was happening, and when you were describing the difference between when you kind of are daydreaming and you get this idea that's really great and creative versus ruminating, and the difference there is when you get into this place, and it kind of gets into spirituality a little bit, so it's going to sound woo woo to some people, and take it for what you want.
Go for it. I love spirituality. It's very important. Some people are like, oh, like, what do you mean when you talk about like being one with the universe? It's like, no, there is something to spiritual and mystical experience, especially related to like, well, yeah, I was going to say psychedelics. We can maybe touch on that after if you want.
No,
yeah,
totally. I'm super into spirituality. I love all of that stuff. So when you're getting those aha moments, you tend to be in a theta state, which is kind of that daydreamy space. And then some people would say that it's you accessing Akashic records. So all of the information that was, is, or ever will be. So it's you just kind of pulling out from the universe's library, if you will. So Michael Jackson used to say, like, he'd get his ideas while he was sleeping and he'd wake up with them, like, for his songs. And he would call his producer or agent or something and be like, we have to get in the studio right now. I need to write this song. And they're like, Michael, it's 4 a.m. We can do it later. This is ridiculous. And he's like, no, if I don't write it, Prince is going to. So it was like, it was the idea that information wasn't his, right? It already existed, and he was pulling it for himself. And that's kind of where those daydreams and that theta state gets you. And then when you're in that rumination period, it tends to be of more gamma state, which is very fast and very negative, and it's very hard to get into a flow state. So you're not going to be really creative. You're not going to problem solve accurately. It's just like too much happening up in your brain. So you have to do something like meditation to bring those waves down. So this training essentially gets you to intentionally put yourself into an alpha, theta, or now delta state, and then to be able to access all of the benefits from those places. So alpha would be flow. Athletes get there a lot. Anyone that's really skilled at a specific trade can get there, and it's losing a perception of time and space, and you're just like in the zone. They also say it's like really good for manifestation. So you can, do your affirmations and all of that while you're meditating, and then hopefully those things come obviously with a good combination of hard work, but a little bit of magic too.
Yeah. Although usually when you're meditating, you want to kind of let go of desire a little bit, right? It's, well, not a little bit. It
depends on your objective, right? Like you can
sure.
Because if you talk about Joe Dispenza, for example, he does meditation retreats, and that agenda is healing. So there's still a means to that end, and you're still in a state. You're in a heightened state consciously, like your consciousness is heightened and elevated, but there's still a goal. It's like you go there and you're trying to cure your glaucoma or a cancer or whatever. And he has some crazy stories from his retreats of like very, very amazing success stories. So I think there's times where you meditate and your goal is to just be and be no one and have no thought, right? And that's an intention, or it could be to manifest, or it could be to heal, or it could be to heal and to like emotionally heal and forgive. So yeah, I think that there's always an intention, even if that intention is to have no intentions.
Yes. Yeah. That's really beautiful. It's, the 3 principles I like to keep in mind when meditating are, and this was taught to me by a meditation teacher, which is you are nothing, you want nothing, and you do nothing for that period of time. Because for me, that's one of the key triggers for getting lost in thought is like, I want this, I want that, I want to convince this girl to love me, or I want to finish this article, or I want to do this podcast or achieve this goal. And so it's always coming from a place of wanting. And that is another fundamental insight of meditation, is in the process of always trying to become happy, we're actually losing our ability to be happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're always, and this is an insight that I've very kind of recently come across and I've been thinking a lot about the half-life of actual positive experience, or the half-life of actually achieving something. Like you finish a marathon and you're really happy about it, or you're finally in this relationship with this girl you've been dreaming about, and then a few weeks later you're like, oh, she's kind of annoying, like she's always like bothering me and I'm not like being productive, like something that you always really really wanted. Or even like you can take a look at like being really thirsty for water, and then like all you think about is like, oh, I'm so thirsty and my throat is parched, and that's dominating your consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And then you take a sip of that water and you keep sipping and sipping, and then it's like, oh, that's all of a sudden it's like that desire dissipates, and then it's not, you can't just drink water forever, right? It's everything is transient. All experiences are transient, including very pleasurable experience, and acknowledging the cyclicality of that you holding your happiness contingent on a certain goal or ambition or person is not a sustainable framework to have, because as soon as you get that thing, you're going to become dissatisfied very quickly, or you're going to be distracted or pursuing that other thing that you want,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you want to be in a relationship, you're in the relationship, and then you feel like you're not productive, right? I know certain people who have been in relationships and they feel like they're not as academically focused enough because they're always thinking about this person and their work is suffering.
Mm-hmm.
I'm speaking of younger people. Or you're in the relationship and then next you want kids, and then you got kids. And then you look at your friends who are single, who don't have kids, who aren't in relationships, they're getting so much work done. But really, when you were in that place, you wanted that relationship. So it's like this constant loop of never actually being happy, but trying to become happy. And you rob yourself of well-being. And that's a realization that is important for me to have more and more, or to inch closer towards that fundamental insight, because I am super, super ambitious and super driven to do certain things,
Mm-hmm.
Especially for my age, obviously. I'm always striving for that next thing all the time, that next viral article, going on Ben Shapiro's show, talking to Jordan Peterson. Oh, I just talked to him for 3 hours. That was super cool. Oh my God, that was amazing. And this kind of like euphoric bliss all of a sudden, like, God, I just talked to Jordan Peterson for 3 hours. Holy shit. And then it's like, then you wake up the next day and you're like, oh, now, what's the next thing? Now I want to go on Megyn Kelly's podcast. Now I want to do Joe Rogan's show. And then the happiness from talking to Jordan Peterson was, as amazing as that, was, and he's awesome and so inspirational. But ultimately that euphoric high that you get is temporary. And then you're searching for the next thing. And so for me, it's very important to come to that realization, because I'm always just chasing and chasing and chasing. And I never seem to be just happy on my own. And that's why meditation is just so, so crucial to ground me and to actually be present, opposed to just lost in thought all the time.
There's this really good book. It's written by the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop Tutu. It's called The Book of Joy. And they kind of distinguish the difference between happiness and joy, which is really fascinating. And he kind of says that joy is an internal state that can that has longevity, that can exist regardless of external factors. And then happiness is more of that fleeting moment. So that's more based off of these external things that you're chasing. And that it's important to be able to do the work to be able to get your inner state to joy and stop focusing so much on happiness. Because like you said, it's always fleeting, right? It's temporary. It's a lot of, neurochemicals that are going off, and you're getting that dopamine, which is that anticipatory neurochemical, and then as soon as you get it, it's gone, right? Like as you start eating that piece of cake, it's like it's no longer exciting. So to be able to have something that's a little bit more substantial and then has more staying power than that one thing.
Right. And you were saying you've been on this meditation retreat, was it, where you were meditating for how many hours was it? I'm curious about your
Oh
experience
man.
and what insights you got from that.
So the one, they don't really market it as meditating per se, but it's essentially what it is. It's done with very specific parameters. Like he has this patented protocol that you do to be able to achieve the success that you do when you leave, as far as your brain scans go. But they don't. There is no time. So you go into a building and you don't have any windows there, you don't have cell phones, there's no clocks on anything, so you don't have time. Like he doesn't believe in time for the most part. He tries to live his life without believe. Like he'll set meetings and respect those, right, because he has to function in the real world, but he tries to avoid it while he can. So I think my longest day there was probably, I don't know, 15 hours or something like that. And then for a good amount of it, you go into this room, and it's pretty cold. It's like in the 60s because they want you to be alert. It's pitch black. Like you can't see your hand in front of your face. There is a screen that gives you your brain scores on it as far as which hemispheres are firing and at what amplitude. And then you can hear your brain waves. So the only sensory feedback you have is auditory, but I mean, it makes you really go inside, right? And then I would imagine you're probably in there for 2+ hours at a time. So it's a
Hmm.
while. Yeah. And then you get
Interesting.
a break, and then you go back in and you go back in, and then you
Hmm.
talk about it and you deconstruct your
Very
experiences if you
interesting.
had any. And you can actually have the equivalents of psychedelic experiences like
Mm.
hallucinations,
Right.
auditory, visual, um, even like feeling like you're out of body, like crazy, crazy stuff. But
Hmm.
the practical goal of it is you leave and you have usually 13 plus points on your EQ, your IQ goes up a couple points. A lot of people's income tends to naturally go up when they leave, just because of all of these other things, EQ, IQ, and law of attraction. He gets very spiritual there. He kind of waits till you're there to start giving you all of the information. So his goal is to help usher in global enlightenment. So it's like a very
Mm.
ambitious goal that he has.
Yeah.
And he's a really fascinating dude. It's called Cybernaut, and the founder is Dr. Hart, and it's HARDT. I actually did a podcast with him, but
Mm.
he's just such a great guy. He's one of those people that you meet, and he's just so light and so intelligent, and the way that he sees the world and the information he has is mind blowing. And
Mm.
um, yeah, it's highly recommended. I was a totally different
Wow.
person afterwards. I never would have,
Really?
yeah, never would have fallen into meditation, or he does a lot of forgiveness work. That's kind of what his protocol is, to get you into these alpha states. Um, I'm like, I'm not forgiving that person. You don't know what they did to me, or they don't deserve it. And it's
Hmm.
shifting
Hmm.
the way that you look at reality and saying it has nothing to do with them. It has nothing to do with them. It has nothing to
Hmm.
do with what they did. It could be horrendous. It has to do with healing yourself, and
Mm.
all of the benefits you're going to get from that. Even, some people that have autoimmune issues or get disease, a lot of it comes from um, all of this hate that we have inside of us, and all of this residual resentment, and not taking care of traumas and wrongdoings. And he's seen people turn corners with serious health issues, with personality issues, psychological issues. So it's really fascinating, and it's all basically because
Hmm.
of meditating and his technology. So he's really advanced in the field with that. I think that helps speed it up a lot. But it's not to say that meditation, the old fashioned way of you sitting on a
Right.
phone in a
Yeah.
quiet
Yeah.
room, isn't gonna help.
Yeah. 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 Of course. Yeah. I should reach out to him. Maybe that's very interesting. Dr. Hart.
Yeah,
I'll look
he's the
into him.
coolest dude. I highly
Yeah.
recommend
Yeah.
it.
Maybe I should listen to your podcast with him. It might be
Yeah,
interesting.
it's cool. We had it sucked. We were talking for an hour and a half, and then I realized his link wasn't working. I was using a different platform, and it wasn't recording his audio for some reason.
Ooh.
So only got
Okay.
mine, and we had such juicy, juicy, juicy content. And he was like, "This was divine intervention. It's probably good
Wow.
that it doesn't go out. We'll just start over, and I'll just omit some of the
Okay.
spicier stuff." And I was like, "Damn it!" But
Yeah.
it was so good.
Yeah. Yeah. I like
Mhm.
that. That's divine intervention when something doesn't go in the desirable way. I like that.
No,
That's a
he
profound
purely
thing.
believes that. He's a very, very spiritual guy.
Wow. Wow.
Mhm.
Very
But yeah, I
interesting.
think
Yeah,
you'll
I'll
get
look into
along.
him.
You
Yeah.
totally
Have you?
should.
Yeah. Is he open to like talking to people, or is he like very busy with like his
He's
work and
super
stuff?
busy, but if he
Yeah.
like you have a platform, right? And you're
Yeah.
doing some really cool stuff, so I think he would make
Yeah.
time. And I mean, his goal too is to get more brand awareness to be able to help change
Hmm.
humanity at his scale, right? He's like literally trying
Yeah.
to raise everyone, every conscious human being to a different level of enlightenment. So I think the more ears that he gets, the better.
Hmm.
But
Yeah. No. Yeah. I like those kind of spiritual entrepreneurs. People who are spreading
mhm.
not just a positive message, but yeah, like leading to spiritual growth. Yeah, that's very interesting to me. Like
Yeah.
especially people are just so committed to bettering the lives of others, or also like other people. I don't know if you've met like like monks or gurus. I don't know if you've ever been in that realm where like
I
people
have
who have like
not, unfortunately. I would love to though.
yeah. I've met a couple of gurus before. Maybe just one. Shri Ravi Shankar is his name. He's a leader of the Art of Living Foundation, which
Okay.
is I think probably the biggest global meditation organization, where they have. Do you know what ashrams are?
Mm-mm.
So places where people go, like a temple, like a church, but you go there for meditation and service,
Okay.
and there's food, and you volunteer. It's a big organization, and so there's art of living ashrams all across. There's a few in the U.S. and a lot of art of living courses in the Bay Area and L.A. and New York and Vancouver and Germany and India, obviously all these places.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting to meet with somebody who is a guru or somebody who has like renounced the material world, who like
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't have these constant sexual or material or um, hedonistic impulses at all. Like they're just committed to bettering the lives of others and being fully connected in this moment. That's enlightenment, and that's like I'm just so far away from that ideal that just so fascinates me. And I'm even a little skeptical. Like, is that even achievable, or do I even want that?
I was gonna say, yeah,
But
you
there,
have to ask yourself if
yeah.
you even want it. You know what I mean? And I don't think that's for
Well,
everybody.
no. Yeah, and it's in fact you don't want it. Like 99% of people
I
don't want
don't.
it.
I'm
No,
here
yeah,
in this flesh suit
sure,
for a reason to experience
exactly,
all of my
yeah,
senses and go 100 until I hit a wall.
yeah, exactly. But at the same time, you need to get those insights from the
For sure.
Eastern realm. Like so many people I know, like so many, or not that I know, but that I know of, including Sam Harris, like Westerners who are so dissatisfied with this, overly consumerist capitalist society where you're just kind of wanting and wanting, and your desires are constantly fed more and more with the rise of technology and commerce and the internet. And so they're just so dissatisfied with the material world that they go out and trek to the east to India, and they go meditate and they learn from people who have renounced absolutely everything, and now they're just sitting and meditating. And a lot of people they draw parallels between those kind of experiences with psychedelic experiences, which I don't know if you've ever explored in that realm before.
I have, but it wasn't as magical as I wanted. I have another one scheduled for next month, and I'm going to do it with my husband. So I'm hoping that
Oh,
maybe
really?
him being there
Okay.
will help amplify my experience. I also did a really small dose because I'm someone that's very sensitive to anything. I'm super sensitive to
Yes.
caffeine and alcohol, so I wanted to be conservative with that. And I still I had an experience, but it wasn't life changing, and I didn't see any aliens, and it wasn't like that. You know what I mean? So we'll see about the second one. But I hate to cut this short, but I
Sure.
do have to go. I would love to have you
For
back
sure.
on because I would love to get
Yeah.
more into like psychedelics and spirituality and all of that good stuff. But
Yeah.
um
For
this
sure.
has been
Especially
great.
since I'm going to be exploring with psychedelics. I'm just beginning to get into it. So maybe next
Yeah,
time
let me
I'll
know after
record.
you do it,
I'll
and we can do
yeah.
an episode. That'd be super cool.
Yeah. We'll talk about it. I'm going to start with microdosing and then maybe have some actual trips with
I
psilocybin
would
and
say
some
the
like
opposite.
yeah.
I'd say do the
No?
opposite. Yeah, microdosing.
Okay.
So again, if you're going at it from a spiritual angle, you want to be very specific as to what mushroom you're getting, where it's coming from, like have some kind of mentor that's leading the ceremony, right? Like a shaman, ideally, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll do this really elaborate ceremony. The ceremony for us was like 2 hours before we actually even took the
Really?
mushroom. And that's so important. It's so important.
With the shaman, you did this?
Yeah. We have a shaman. He's like, we see him all the time. He comes over to the house. We do meditation things like
Really?
weird
Wow.
out. Yeah. He's part of the
Hook me
family.
up. Hook me
Yeah.
up.
Part of the
I'll come over.
family. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's got
Yeah.
an entheogenic church. And so it's all
Interesting.
above ground, but you kind of connect and integrate with this plant before you do the journey. And that's so imperative. And then after that, you microdose from the same plant. That way you can kind of re-experience that frequency to some level. So you don't want to just be microdosing casually. It's not a great idea. You don't know the plant. There hasn't been that ceremonial connection. It's essentially going to be like you taking Adderall. You know what I mean? So you're not going to get a lot from it.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard the exact opposite from various experts that I've spoken to about psychedelics. Like there's Dr. Mike Hart, who's specializes in marijuana medicine, but also psychedelic therapy. He's based in Toronto. He's been on Joe Rogan before, and a couple of other guys as well. And they recommended microdosing as a way to ease into it, to kind of just familiarize yourself with it. And especially Dr. Hart was telling me about microdosing can help with people who over ruminate. It can just give you subtle changes in consciousness where you're a bit more present, you're a bit more aware of your surroundings, and you're not just constantly thinking about yourself or being obsessive. That's the most common apparent experience people have, and that's something that's one of the reasons why I want to try psychedelics and explore in that whole realm, is to experience that kind of ego death, the beyond the self that people always talk about through psychedelics. So for me, I've done a lot of research, and so I think I'm going to try with the microdosing, because it won't have a radical effect on me anyways. I'm going to go super, super small at first, just for a couple of weeks. So it's totally harmless, and see what happens afterwards. See if it works, or if I experience something or not, or if it's horrible, or if it's profound. So it's just a matter of experimentation, I think.
Well, good luck. Yeah, let me know when you do your big trip. I'd love to hear about it. But can you tell the listeners where they can follow you, any work, where they can find your articles, and how they can support you?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at RAVARORA1, Ravarora1. You can follow me there, and I usually write for the New York Post and the Globe and Mail and Quillette, so you can find my articles there. If you search up my name, you can find it all there.
Well, good stuff. I'm super glad that this worked out, and thank you so much for giving me all of your time.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate it.
Well, that's it for this week's episode. If you enjoyed the podcast, please consider leaving a 5-star review, commenting, sharing it with a buddy. And if you really, really liked the podcast, you can go to chattingwithcandice.com and click that little link that says buy me a coffee or sign up for my Patreon account. Both things help me out a ton. Everything goes directly back into the podcast and advertising. And then also, just a quick reminder, if you're not on Minds yet, I definitely recommend checking it out. It's basically a free-for-all Twitter that's decentralized, and they believe in freedom of speech, and they're anti-censorship. They actually pay you in Minds coins, so they have their own cryptocurrency, which is pretty cool. So you can join me on Minds. It's just minds.com/Candice Horback. You should check it out if you believe in freedom. I'll see you guys next time.